My name is Innocent Mugenga and this is Learnability, an open-ended exploration of our ability and desire to learn, grow and adapt. Let's go! In collaboration with Gather, an innovation conference within the intersection of tech, science, business, public sector and culture, we will be creating the Gather series. In that we will explore digital democracy, virtual love, urban planning, future of work, information age and so much more. Join us!
Jag tror jag skrev till henne. Jag minns inte vad.
Men sen så började vi typ prata på Facebook.
Jag trodde bara att det var en kul grej typ.
Hur du är hade inte varit konstigt om du var en oerfaren 13-åring.
Hej då, puss!
Hur tränar man på att vara sårbar?
My name is Lina Maria Mannheimer, and I'm a filmmaker. And I'm here because of my new film, Mating. I think,
Mating, yeah.
mostly.
And that's what we're here to talk about as well. Tell us a little bit about the experience, and you can tell us first and foremost about the film. What is it about, and then the experience filming it.
My film is about Naomi and Edwin, two 20-something Swedish people that I met a few years ago. I started this whole project with that I was curious about what happens with our relationships when they suddenly take place on this infinite ultra-liberal market that is a digital one, where we can meet anyone at all times, anywhere.
Yeah.
And how do we present ourselves there? What does it do to what we long for? And how do you present yourself as an attractive human being?
Yeah.
So I interviewed 40 people between 18 to 25, so-called digital natives.
Yeah, exactly.
That have never really lived in a world without a high-speed internet. And I asked them questions about their mating behaviors, their view in the future, how they want to create a family, how they date, if they think they have a good sex life, how they see their possibilities of obtaining things in life and fulfilling their dreams.
Yeah.
It's quite intimate, but also...
We will get more into your findings there, like what you actually found out. That's really
Well, that was really, for me, my first research step was okay, listening to these, because I suddenly realized that I am among the latest generations that will have actually been living in a before and after.
Yeah, the transition generation. Yeah.
So I actually remember when someone came to my school in middle school, I think.
Yeah.
And they presented something that was called the World Wide Web.
Oh, okay.
And I remember thinking that I must have misunderstood something, because it's like magic, but it's like you type in something and you get a response and where, and the whole, like it was incredible. So I have learned how to use the internet in my behaviors.
And
now.
Probably had to unlearn some stuff that you previously knew.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
So I did these 40 in-depth interviews, and that was amazing. Yeah. Really fantastic. I walked into people's homes and I filmed them somewhere, and I talked to them for about an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And Naomi and Edwin were in these 40 people.
Yeah.
And then I was interested in looking at what happens with our communication depending on which platforms we communicate at.
Oh, yeah.
And I was also wanting to find a way of what happens with authenticity, and how do you relate to another person when you communicate digitally. And I thought that if I try this as a filmmaker, only communicating with these new technologies with my main characters. I would see, you know, how do we get to know each other? So in my film, actually, what you see, the first interviews that I have with them are the first interviews that we have. And throughout the film, you know, we never meet. We meet this first time in 2015, and then we never see each other IRL, so to say. So what you see in the film when they talk to me, this is how we get to know each other entirely through behind the screens.
My name is Josue. I'm a researcher in economics.
Yes.
My research explores how online dating changes how integrated our society is in terms of race, socioeconomic status, and so on and so forth.
Oh, yeah. And what we're doing here is we're sort of exploring how different verticals and different technologies are developing and how that might affect our the way we interact with each other and what we call love and the future of that. So I want to start off with asking you about a field that I think you've researched a bit on, and that's our digital social integrations.
Right. So one great thing about digital interactions is first, it's much easier to find someone who is also looking for someone like you. So for example, if I'm a divorced old male, it's kind of hard for me to find someone who is searching for me if I go to the pub every day, or it's hard to, or if I'm an homosexual person who has a small pool of potential partners.
Oh, yeah.
Meaning online makes finding someone much easier. And that means that searching, there are fewer costs for that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, perhaps you would be alone for a longer time and so on. And that's one big thing. Another thing is that it gets us outside our social bubble. So we go to school with people who are like us, we study with people who are like us, we live with people that are like us, and our communities are highly segregated. But with Tinder, online dating in general, you can meet someone who was otherwise a complete stranger, someone you would never meet. And that makes a huge difference because, okay, now you are interacting with people outside. And it's a bit the same effect that Erasmus has, studying abroad. Suddenly, okay, you meet new people, you start breaking the racial barrier, you start breaking the national barrier, and then suddenly you become a much wider person in the sense of who you know and who you could actually be matched to, which otherwise would be very difficult. For example, in the US, the average high school student has less than one interracial friend. So before we could cross the interracial barrier, but it was very hard. Well, Latino, we all live in some areas. Asian people all live in some areas. And that's a new thing that online dating is doing. Yeah. You know, meeting someone randomly, and that's great.
That's really, the way you put it is great. You're sort of removing the limits of physical boundaries and opening up the whole world. So that's on the positive side. Have you explored any downsides of this, or like what could the negative side be of this?
Yeah, there are a few. So, for example, it could be that searching is cheaper, so is contacting, and maybe that will lead to some sort of, people are talking but not saying much, or the relationships are created are bad, or there's some abuse. Well, there's the possibility that there is some sort of abuse that dating companies are trying to prevent now, in the sense of somebody sending a copy-paste message to everybody. It's also true that in general we see that relationships that start online tend to last a bit longer than those that and they also reveal a higher degree of satisfaction.
Okay, that's kind of counterintuitive.
It's so counterintuitive because if you talk to an older person, they'll say, "Well, Tinder is for hookups."
Yeah,
and all right, but many people like, okay, you're meeting, you go for a drink, and then we want to go out later, and so on. And that was an incredibly interesting paper in a scientific journal. And it's because, when you go online, you're actually searching.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe every of us knows how if you go to a pub, you don't know if the person you're going to talk to is also searching. And, but online it is.
So my name is Ylva Hansdotter, and I'm a PhD candidate at University College of Dublin, where I am studying how we can leverage virtual reality to stimulate social good. And I also have a nonprofit organization, XR Impact, where we are leveraging VR to stimulate actions toward the UN Sustainable Development Goals.
I love that work. I'm really glad you're doing that. And I think having tried VR, I think it's a really good tool in giving us another perspective, really allowing us to get in different positions. But I'll take you a little bit out of your comfort zone today, maybe, or not comfort zone, but your usual work. We want to explore VR in the theme of virtual love. So we're exploring different technologies and the development of that. We're talking about robotics, online dating, and I have this idea of virtual reality really enhancing the online dating experience. Have you thought anything about this?
Well, it's actually not very far from my comfort zone because it is about creating emotions in VR. And VR is by far the most psychologically powerful medium we have ever created. The brain in VR thinks is there if it's a good created experience. So it's creating real memories as if you were there. And you have physical and emotional responses as if it was really happening to you. So in terms of that, when we talk about relationships, whether it's with a partner or your friends and families, I think VR is a really good platform to foster that in many different ways, depending on if you know each other well, if it's a long distance thing, and
it seems like our best chance to take our digital life and beings into as close to reality as possible, right?
Yeah, it is.
And I had the opportunity to hear you speak at Stockholm Tech Fest yesterday, and during your presentation, you spoke about our brain being able to recognize a virtual avatar within 20 seconds.
Yeah, so we usually think that we are very defined. Like, this is me, those are my arms, you are not a part of me, but you're real, hopefully. I'm real. But actually, our brain is really flexible. So it takes an average 20 seconds for our brain to accept something that isn't a part of our body as a part of our body if we do it in a good way. It doesn't even have to be in VR. There's an experiment where you get a rubber hand to be like your own hand, and you will respond to threats towards that hand as if it was your own. And you will also start redirecting energy from the brain to that virtual hand. And this has been proven to be the same in VR. So when you embody an avatar in VR, you get that for the entire body. And what's so interesting is that you start to associate yourself with the characteristics of that avatar. So if you're in VR and you are Albert Einstein, you actually, when you take off your glasses and go into the real world, you perform better at problem solving because you know you were smart there, and you bring that out. So it's positive visualization, and you can bring it to the real world, and it's been shown to have lasting effects in the real world.
My name is Elizabeth Yoakum. I'm an associate professor of art and robotics at Aalborg University in Denmark, and I work in the research laboratory for art and technology.
How long time have you been into robotics?
For quite a few years, actually, for probably the last 10 years or so.
Wow.
I started studying theater, and my PhD project was about combining robotics and puppetry and the arts with dance and live performance. And
so you started from the art and theater side and went into robotics.
Yeah, it turns out there's a lot of overlap between the two, but not a lot of people moving back and forth between those two worlds. So that's sort of what I do, and what I've spent the last few years doing is building bridges between the arts and humanities and robotics and computer science.
Because I guess that's what we're trying to do at the end of the day, achieve some sort of level where with emotion, which assembles human movement, or
it's true. So a lot of researchers, particularly in the area of social robotics, for example, are trying to design artificial systems that are engaging, that are lively or lifelike, and that people really want to interact with and feel some affection or affinity for. And in the theater, we've been doing that for thousands of years. We've been creating artificial characters and artificial life. Yes, we've been doing it with human actors, but we've also been doing it with puppets and inanimate objects. So I see a really close connection between the two, even if the technology is a bit different.
And I'll try to explain now the connection I'm trying to do with what you do and robotics to the theme of this episode, which is called Virtually Love. So to do that, I'll start off with an example. I recently watched a Netflix stand-up comedy of Whitney Cummings, where half of the show is her talking about a sex robot that she made of herself. And we've seen the movement from or I've heard talks about the movement from sex dolls into robots and furthering that. And if that should reach its ultimate stage, it needs to be very human-like. So I'm interested in exploring how, if we will reach that stage, how the journey is going currently and our current situation, future of robotics. Do you get that connection between?
Well, before I'll answer that, I'll turn it around and ask another question. Do sex robots need to be really human-like for us to have sex with them? People have been having sex with machines for an awfully long time. The sort of history of sex toys is that, right? And that's been a very profitable industry without ultra-realistic humanoid robots. Now, you're right, and Whitney Cummings is right too. There is a trend that we've seen towards the development of these really hyper-realistic, lifelike dolls. And in fact, some of them don't look all that different than research robots that we are using to study human-robot interaction and communication. So I do think it is something that we need to pay attention to and be aware of. It's also not that far off. There have been love hotels operating in Korea for a very long time. There is a robot sex brothel operating in Denmark, not far from where I live.
Okay, so it's live and out there. That's crazy.
Well, it's out there. I'm not sure it's alive.
Okay.
We can debate that point, but
To answer your question, and this is not me, my belief, but an answer to that question, does it need to be human-like? I'm guessing what you're trying to get at in making it human-like, or the speculation around it becoming human-like, is that we will replace our human relationships and be able to have that fully with a robot. So imagine a robot looking exactly like a human. Will we need a human, sort of?
Right. And I think that the distinction that you made just there is an important one. And you're speaking to the fear that a lot of people have. Of course, for the entire length of human history, we have formed empathic, human friendly relationships with objects. People name their cars. They feel empathy for their phone. And both, in technology in particular, we form attachments and ascribe sort of meaning and lifelikeness to objects and things that we know that aren't alive. But when it starts to replace or become a substitute for real human contact, that is what makes people uncomfortable. And I think there are reasons to be concerned about that, quite honestly. I think the fear is, human relationships, interpersonal communication, they're messy, right? We don't get to optimize and choose what our friends look like or what our lovers' specifications are, right?
To turn off a conversation, sort of,
exactly. So we really have to, in the real world, we're learning to interact and deal with people, and that actually cultivates and continues our capacity for empathy and our ability to feel responsibility and also be vulnerable and attuned to other people's vulnerability. The danger when you start to replace those relationships with customizable machines that sort of respond on demand according to your will, the question then becomes, will that erode our capacity to build meaningful relationships with other humans.
Oh yeah.
And there are a lot of psychologists looking at this. There are a lot of folks who are studying these kinds of things. On the one hand, yes, we want machines that are interactive.
Yes.
On the other hand, there might be some downsides, and it's important that we consider them while we're developing these technologies.
I'm wondering rather if what we're doing is trying to find the easy way out. So you were talking about relationships, and it takes a lot of work in keeping relationships, and you can spend countless of hours training on emotional intelligence. But if you have a robot, isn't that what we humans do? We innovate to make life more comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Could that be a motivating factor in us moving towards, or some people rather, preferring to have a relationship with a robot in that case?
Yeah, I mean, particularly in the area of social robotics, this is something that becomes very important, right? There are sort of communities and populations that would really benefit from interaction with robots over people, for example, and that have real sort of therapeutic benefits. There's a lot of really interesting research going on with social robotics and children with autism spectrum disorder. There's social robotics projects that are working with elderly patients in nursing homes with dementia and incorporating robotics into that kind of level of care. And, there's very compelling evidence that these robot solutions are not necessarily substituting human interaction, but they're certainly sort of augmenting or providing some kind of solution to real emotional needs for context for these populations. It's certainly true that it's going to happen in our social lives in more mainstream circles as well. So I don't want to downplay the possibility or the potential of social robotics in our lives. I just think we need to be careful and think through where we want to be introducing these technologies and what some of the trade-offs are, because there are trade-offs.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, do we really have any chance? Because we're creating this to solve problems, actual problems, and it's a good solution. Like if you have someone in an elderly home that has the opportunity to meet someone limited amounts of hours, but the need is so much more. If we can bring in a robot, that's very positive. But there will always be the downside. And is there any way of escaping or keeping safe from that downside?
Well, right. I think it would be great if we could meet somewhere in the middle, right? Yeah. So not to have an extreme reaction one way or another to sort of exclude all human contact or to reject all technology completely, right? Our history, human evolution with technology, these are questions that we've been thinking about what our relationship should be. And I think the thing that's pushing the issue a little bit more are the media and the kind of media coverage of advancements in robotics and robots that are now equipped with AI. And that's one of the things I'm discussing and looking at in my research is these sort of media performances of robots and AI that trigger the imagination, but that also maybe are a bit misleading in terms of the current state of the art about where robotics and where AI applications really are at the moment.
I think that's a big thing, media coverage, and you get an image, and you have popular culture as well, films portraying a certain image, and it's all speculations, and that leaves a lot of room for our fantasy to take it to the next step.
It's true, and that's one of the things why I think this theme of fake it till you make it and virtual love becomes really important, that we as citizens are able to discern between the fact and the fiction. And it's becoming increasingly difficult to do, just as it is within online and virtual worlds. It's also increasingly difficult with kind of machines that we meet in our daily life, robots that are sort of giving staged performances. And I'll give you an example. There, recently, about 2 years ago, there was a humanoid robot that was granted citizenship in Saudi Arabia, the Sophia robot.
I read about that.
Made by Hanson Robotics. Now, that is a spectacular robot. It is absolutely a wonderful work of art. But it is not an AI. And it also kind of troubles the question of when we're discussing human rights for robots in a country and in a part of the world where women still do not enjoy equal rights. Yeah. So these kinds of questions where I think that these media performances might be distracting us a little bit from important questions, which is why I wanted to turn your earlier question around a little bit. Really instead of thinking about what the sort of human cost is, what the human and what the cost and choices we make as a society are. To remember that we actually do have a choice in building these robots. They are not inevitable, right? No. We actually get to decide how they get built, where they get introduced. Are we using them in schools? Are we using them in healthcare facilities? These are human choices, right?
A lot of what we're talking about here is new, so we're still learning a lot of it. You were talking about how you were a part of this transition generation, and we're really still learning. Some of us are born into the digital, but I think even they are learning. I'm born 91, so I'm 28. Yeah. So I also have my childhood without the digital.
But not your teens.
Not my teens. No, exactly.
That's a huge difference.
Yeah. So let's talk about broader terms, because you interviewed 48, did you say?
40.
40 teenagers or young adults.
Young adults,
What sort of insights did you gain from these interviews, and what's, if you're to paint with a broad picture, what I'm trying to get at is all this that we're exploring. So if it's virtual reality, robotics, online dating, it's a lot in the future. And like we said, I think this is the generation that this is very relevant for. So how are they adapting to and encompassing the digitalization?
Well, one thing that I thought was very interesting was that I strongly had the feeling that they wanted to talk to me. Many of them said, because I asked them in the end of the interview, I would ask them, so why did you agree to do this interview with me? Or what were you hoping to get? Or what did you want to give? Or like, why are we here? And many of them express that I'm in the middle of something here and I have no clue what it is. I don't know really how it will affect me. And I don't have much to look at because I don't really know. So it was like they were feeling that they were contributing to a greater good by talking to me and really wanting me to give them answers. If I give this to you, you know, maybe you can explain to me what's going on. Because of course, you know, this is maybe the fastest shift, technological shift or revolution that mankind has ever known, which is mind-blowing when you think about it. So we know that this is a revolution. We know that it affects all parts of our lives, most probably our brains, the younger generation's brains, our behaviors, and we don't really know how, and we don't know what the consequences will be. And them growing up, they can't look, you know, usually a generation, they look at older generations and they reject that. They say, you know, fuck you, I don't want to do it like this. I'm doing it my way. I'm doing it this way. But you're in communication. Now suddenly you have a generation that, first of all, if you're not on their platforms, you're not communicating with them. So even though you might be in the same house, if you are not on those platforms where your children are at or your young adults, you don't know what's going on. So it's a very, it's quite crazy.
And that's talking different languages. And also, if we're talking about the generation shifts, so there's a conventional way. And for my generation, that's what you learned. Like you go to school, get a job, get married, and so on. Whatever, different cultures have different versions of that. But today it's so fast and we don't know really what it is. I'm guessing they're just living in it, like you said. And there's no way of looking at that and finding answers. And there's no way of stepping back and trying to find, you're just going with it and learning as you're going.
And that was very, when it came to Tinder, for example, something that many of them said was that I'm there and I'm in there and I do it and I get sucked up in it and then I get exhausted and then I get off it for a while. That was very common.
Okay, so they sort of need
It's
a detox from it.
Yeah, because it was like I mean, now I'm generalizing, of course, but and also it was a few years, but that was how I remembered, like, many of the stories went, that I go in there and I'm there and I meet several people, and, maybe I sleep with them, and, I date several, and then it's just like this exhaustion, I think, of investing emotionally, and, maybe you have met several people that you're not really interested in. And at the end of the day, you're just like, what the fuck is going on here? What am I doing? And this is nothing, or I'm hurt, or whatever. And they go on a break, and then they get energy again. And but I also think it's, merely luck. I think it's a great tool to meet people. You have the opportunity to meet people that you would probably never have met otherwise, and it's fantastic. But it's also, that you're choosing in a huge pool, and you can spend a lot of time being in kind of bad or not really important relationships. I mean, I feel, so I felt that it was like waves for them.
And I can get that, because there really is the upside of being able to meet more people. It increases your chances maybe, but the downside is that you have to meet more people, and that's strenuous in itself.
I like to play football, and I moved to Germany recently. Finding someone to play football is kind of hard. And online dating has this effect that it's really easy to find a coincidence. And you could think, okay, maybe if we all have very strong racial preferences, well, it's going to segregate us even more. But we know that's not the case, because once you have friends from different groups, then the racial barriers disappears. We know that, for example, from soldiers, there will be a high racial preference, but when they come back from service, once they had a diverse group of colleagues, then they're okay with everything. Revealing that maybe we just have a prejudice, but online dating, you see and you say, well.
And I guess it's quite a new medium, so the only thing we have to go on is our prejudice. And it's actually great that people like you are finding the data of, wow, it's actually this way. It's not what you thought.
It's not what you thought, exactly. It's funny, because our governments and societies spend a lot of money trying to make our societies more integrated. And then something comes so silly as Tinder, and then we're using all in a selfish way. But it has an effect when you look at the big picture. And the interesting thing is, Tinder started in 2012. Most of the effects are yet to be seen. So this is what we know. Most relationships now, most marriages now start online. Wait 10 years. I mean, in 10 years, it's going to be a complete revolution in how we are used to courtship, we're going to be completely changed.
And I see also a reason that could be that the relationships are longer and there's a higher satisfaction is we're doing it more. If we're dating more, we're getting more experience. We're sort of learning what we don't like, what we shouldn't say, and maybe becoming better.
That's very, very interesting what you're saying. There's this nice finding in economics that when divorce became legal, the number of cases of domestic abuse reduced by a lot, because now women had the possibility of, okay, if I'm in a bad position, I just leave. And the number of female suicides also reduced by a lot. So if you're in a bad relationship, well, if, for example, you're an older person, leaving, it has high cost, because you think, well, maybe I will not meet anybody now. But now, online dating improves your outside chances. You can leave and you can find somebody new.
Exactly that. You can leave and then you can find someone.
Exactly.
So, and VR can also be used by existing couples for couple therapy and for them to get to know each other better and maybe work through problems. So you could actually body swap with your partner, so you can get to be in the shoes of your partner, trying to understand and see what you are saying from their perspective.
And that actually works, so you can really see it from that other perspective.
Yes.
Because that's hard, seeing stuff from another perspective.
It is really hard. And I mean, that's usually what couples therapy is about, to understand the other person. And VR has been proven to be really efficient when it comes to perspective taking. And there's one study with male domestic abuse offenders where they were shown not to be able to classify fearful women's faces. So when they saw a picture of a woman with a fearful face, that they classified it as a happy face instead of fear. But after being embodied as a female victim in VR, not their victim, but a victim was enough to see themselves as a woman and see like a man doing that to them. Their facial emotional recognition became in line with the control group of non-convicted men. So it really works.
So what do you believe is the future of online dating looking forward? Because we're talking in this episode about different technologies and how that I can see a Tinder with virtual reality, for example, or we're talking about robotics and how all of this combined and what we consider to be a relationship and love in the future.
I work mainly in the field of algorithms.
Yes.
I like to think myself as a mathematician.
Yeah.
And what some people are doing now is trying to see how good you're a match for somebody else. And now, Tinder algorithm so far is pretty much random. It matches you anything. But what if the algorithm, like in OkCupid, it tells you you're a better match for this person, so I'm going to put it forward.
Okay.
And some people think that could go very well.
Yeah.
I have some doubts.
Okay.
It's very interesting. It's the same thing, Tinder, but the algorithm, how people are shown to you. If you think, okay, I'm a high compatibility with someone from my own race, then the effect of Tinder is gone. So these suggestions should be, the algorithm behind it has to be very smart at deciding what is compatible.
Oh yeah.
Because maybe you think you're compatible, maybe you are, it's the only thing you know. Maybe if you cross to different things.
That's very interesting. So what you're saying here, or what I'm getting out of this, is that we could almost create new boundaries. So we remove the physical boundaries, but we might add on algorithmic boundaries based off your profile, maybe in that case.
Right. For example, we have many types of online dating so far. We have Tinder, but we also have Bumble, which emerged as a solution to try to reduce the number of abuse that women are getting. Here, the women now have to start the chat.
Yeah.
And in a sense, I think as a community, a society, we're learning by mistakes.
Yes.
So now another mistake that I think Tinder has that it could be improved is that many matches are generated, but many of them don't exchange any conversation. So when I was in the game, I thought, well, I mean, many profiles you see, if women say, don't match with me if you're not going to talk to me, I don't like it. Maybe we could redesign an algorithm that people that are matched actually want to talk to each other.
Where the social interaction is in focus rather than the swiping and matching.
Right, that it's more about the real thing, that we can waste less time in things that are not so interesting.
Because that's very important. I have never used one of these dating apps myself, but I'm wondering how much time you actually spend on it. Right. And what we talk about here in Learnability is using the digital and our phones in a healthy way. So if dating is a good way of finding a match, we should use it, but maybe at a limited amount where we're not spending all day swiping.
Yeah. Even that you never use dating, and now you start saying, okay, I'm going to give it a go. But then everybody you're matching is like, you don't get anything out of it. Yeah. Like there's no interaction. Then okay, maybe you don't start feeling too good. You say, you get like, oh, I don't like it. So maybe we could design these platforms that the matching occurs. There's more real interaction and less the algorithm. The algorithm is great if you don't see it. The more you see it means
Yeah.
So we can do better at that.
If we're extrapolating into the future, we've spoken a little bit about the future here. Is the thesis of virtual reality being a huge part of online dating, is it viable or is it?
It will be a huge part of online dating.
Yeah.
But will it be of dating?
Yes, that's great. I wanted to reframe my question because I realized I said online dating, of relationship
no,
building.
so yes, I do think already today most people meet online. We're living in a more global world. and there are also some people that maybe are afraid to go out dating. They might have social phobias or other things that makes them not want to go out there and have relationships. And in VR, you can actually put on this shield, but you will still get the emotions. So you will not get to intimacy maybe of somebody touching you, but maybe you will, because soon you will have the motion trackers and you could even have oxytocin release into your bloodstreams. You can, and we know that VR does produce real emotions and real memories. So I think that it will be a big part for some people, and I think most of us will have been at least in a couple of dates in VR in like 10 years.
The sex industry is one of the most profitable, and that it has also been at the forefront of every major technological revolution. So I don't think it would be, I think it would be unwise to sort of think that robotics and the evolution of AI wouldn't be part of that, or that there wouldn't find an application, a potential market there. There absolutely is. And there are plenty of companies around the world, in the US and Asia, working on these dolls, selling these dolls. But again, I think it's important that we sort of look at how and where they're being introduced. On the one hand, there's a great potential. You can kind of see the possibility for addressing some of society's problems and some, for example, human trafficking and sex workers. On the other hand, you're putting sex workers out of work, right? So the same conversations about, will robots take our jobs? This is also employment for a large, a percentage of the population, and for people for whom other forms of work might not necessarily be available. So looking at kind of the politics and ethics, not just are sex robots good or bad, or what does that do for us as people, but actually how does that transform, what is the larger impact of that decision on our society? And there might be some benefits there. I think there are some cases to be made for it. And there might be some drawbacks too.
And what I think asking this question to you, you really get that nuanced answer, because it's a complex question. And you're a researcher and you come from that perspective, which I think is needed in this case. But what I'm afraid of is when it gets to the industry side, there's no nuance. It's profit, profit, profit. You stop asking the questions, should we do this, or what's the implications? And
absolutely. Not only is it profit, 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 but it's typically, sort of male inventors making female bots, right? And we are serving disproportionately a percentage of the population. And I do think it is worth, considering these questions about, we were speaking earlier about how we sort of human relationships being messy and needing to learn how to deal with people and to accommodate people and to take care of people. A robotic lover that can be programmed to do exactly as you wish, right? The danger there is that translates over to behavior in the real world, or that people stop seeing the importance of important things like consent and mutuality and mutual affection in relationships. When we turn sex and love into an on-demand service, that is a danger. And that's something that we have to take very seriously, and take seriously how it disproportionately affects women in society.
I think we very often hear about these generations, that the younger generations, that they are weird, that they are not sensitive, that they're just all about hookup cultures or whatever, that they're weird creatures, so to say. And I have to say that I found Naomi and Edwin so much more aware of and talking about vulnerability. How do you get there? really aiming for, knowing that to have good relationships, to have interesting relationships, you need to go to a place when you're vulnerable and lose control. And they're very young, and they were talking about it. They were really, so I think, which is not so weird, of course, when you think about it, but I think that living in one pole, you know, forces you to become aware and go somewhere else. And I think they live in these both sides. Like they train on being more vulnerable and opening up, and you know, they're so aware of that because of them living in this culture where it's in a way very natural not doing that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I'm guessing also, if we're talking about the positive sides of the digitalization, is having the access to tools and learning about being vulnerable and emotional intelligence and all this stuff. So you can actually have access to the tools you need to become more complete when it comes to your love life.
I think above all that it's not technology that will ruin us. It's like we create something that we need to, it's like, you know, when the train came, people were afraid that our legs would dissolve because we would use them. That obviously did not happen. No. It's the same now. Yeah. It's like now we will find a way of handling technology. Yeah. I mean, of course, there are many things that I do not handle in my film with robots and AI and you know, et cetera, where that is a real, you know, issue. Yeah, hopefully. Who will be in power over whom. But we're very adaptable human beings. We will find a way. What's going on now is that we're in the middle of something. We've created these beasts with our phones, and we're in the wild west, basically. So we have many behaviors that I am sure not in a very long time will be crazy for us. It's like smoking. We will look back at it and be like, how could we? Yeah, insane.
I can definitely see that happening.
Yeah. And there will be reactions to it. Yes. I mean, we will use technology in a way that is good for us. But of course, yeah, we probably will have a generation or two where they will be challenged, you know.
And I think it's really important in this, there's so many unanswered questions. Yeah. And it's important having researchers and scientists exploring the questions, as well as artists as yourself exploring and trying to illustrate. So I really want to take the time to thank you so much for the work you do and your time here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Really great perspective. And you gave me a positive outlook on online dating. I'm really glad for that. And also a view of where this might be heading. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your insights. It's been great having you here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Science fiction and the cultural imaginary, they point the way, right? Yes, that's part of our collective dreaming. And that is a very important function. Yes. I think certainly, you know, without artists depicting space, we wouldn't have really dreamed of going there, right? So the role of science fiction is important for helping us think through. We just need to be clear that we are not confusing science fiction with science. Yes. And science. True.
Thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you very much for having me.
Learnability podcast is produced by Levels, working in the fields of digital transformation, innovation, product development, and venture. If you want to know more about us, visit at wearelevels.com. And oh yeah, if you want to find additional material and contribute to the platform, you can do that at learnability.online. That's learnability.online. Looking forward to getting in touch with you. And oh yeah, stay curious.